Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellencies, it really is a pleasure for me to welcome you here at the seminar on Africa, Lessons from India and a Southeast Asian Response. We are honored to host our visiting research fellow from Mumbai University, Dr. Aparajita Biswas, head of the Center for African Studies at Mumbai University, here with us. She's been with us for the past 2 months. And unfortunately, we have to say bye-bye to her. She's leaving us tomorrow. Sort of as a preemptive, thank you very much. It has been great working with you for the past 2 months, and we look forward to your last address in this stint with us. I would also like to welcome our other speaker for the morning, Mr. Ranveer Johan, who is the MD and Global Head of Palm and Rubber at Ola. Thank you also for your willingness to share your thoughts and ideas on participation in Southeast Asia. We're also honored to have with us, ladies and gentlemen, a very distinguished and impressive panel consisting of Mr. Lee Tai, the MD of Surbana Jurong Africa, Mr. Naveen Ravindran, the Vice President Sales of Alice Asia, and Mr. Mike Yap, who is the Senior Director, RHQ Middle East and Africa of Crimson Logic. I'm not sure whether Mike is here yet. Mike's contribution is crucial for us, ladies and gentlemen, and his willingness to add value is clear in the fact that he's only been landing here at 9 o'clock this morning. I truly hope that you will find this a very informative session, and I would like to give a few ideas on, a few thoughts on Singapore's contribution to capacity building in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Singapore, as you know, is a small country without a hinterland or small resources, or natural resources rather. In the immediate years after Singapore's independence in 1965, she benefited from technical assistance provided by and extended by a number of developed countries and international organizations. This helped transform Singapore from a third world country to a modern city-state. And I can remember at the end of last year, I had the Kenyan ambassador to this region talking to a couple of MBA students from Kenya at NTU. And she looked at them and she says, something has gone wrong. Because 50 years ago, Kenya and Singapore were at the same level of development. And if we have a look at where Singapore is today, Kenya is somewhat behind. And she said she was being polite. Today, Singapore shares its development and experience, ladies and gentlemen, and knowledge with others as a responsible global citizen to help them achieve their development goals. It does this in one of 2 ways. Firstly, through the Singapore Cooperation Program, which was established in 1992 to serve as the primary platform through which Singapore offers technical assistance to other countries. Given its limited resources, ladies and gentlemen, Singapore shares its experience and expertise, in particular its human resource development and economic development, with other countries in lieu of providing direct financial assistance. To date, the Singapore Cooperation Program has trained over 80,000 government officials from 170 countries in the Asia-Pacific, Africa, Middle East, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Every year, it conducts 300 programs of courses and trains close to 7,000 government officials. Singapore's bilateral technical assistance programs generally take the form of training courses or study visits conducted in Singapore and covers a diversity of fields ranging from port management, civil aviation, telecommunications, productivity, housing and estate management, information technology, environmental management, and also in English. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, Singapore makes its contribution through the Singapore Cooperation Enterprise set up by the Ministry of Trade and Industry and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Singapore in 2006 to respond effectively to the multitude of foreign requests interested in Singapore's development experience. It provides commercial-based solutions and operates as one window to connect with Singapore's 15 ministries and over 60 statutory boards to scope out and tailor possible solutions to match the needs of foreign governments. Singapore SCE also serves as the focal point of access to expertise from Singapore across its public agencies, It is now, as you would know, an integrated arm of IE Singapore. As of November 2015, ladies and gentlemen, Singapore Corporation Enterprise has successfully delivered over 150 projects and programs in over 30 countries in 4 key regions, namely Asia Pacific, China, Middle East, North Africa, and Latin America, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So as you can see then, Singapore has been very active in capacity building, and a lot of that in Africa. When one talks about participating in Africa's development from an African perspective, ladies and gentlemen, one must see the need in terms of the 5 priorities identified by the President of the African Development Bank, Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, and he speaks about Africa's high 5. And the first priority that he has identified is to light up, empower Africa. One needs to bear in mind that whilst Africa has 1 billion people, over 620 million people of those are without electricity. There is a great need in that. Africa has the problem that whilst coal is cheap and available, if Africa had to go the normal route of lighting up Africa through coal-fired stations, it would make a significant contribution to global warming and climate change, which Africa in itself would be one of the major victims should that happen. Solar is being punted, fortunately, as the business model for electricity, the way going forward. This space needs to be filled. One would need to see how it pans out. The second priority, ladies and gentlemen, is to feed Africa. Africa's people frequently go hungry. We have now the scenario that on the African East Coast, going right down to South Africa, there are major droughts and famine is creeping in. At the same time, however, 60% of arable land left over in the world is in Africa. The DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, on its own can feed 1 billion people. However, it struggles to feed the 70 million people of its own. The same could be said for Angola. One needs to see how we can industrialize Africa's agricultural environment. I had the opportunity a while ago to speak to the president, ex-president rather, of Nigeria, His Excellency Obasanjo, and asked him, we had to give advice to President Buhari as to how to diversify the African and Nigeria's economy. He said it's easy. There are 3 priorities, and not necessarily in the sequence, namely agriculture, agriculture, and agriculture. So it's not only about feeding Africa, it's about industrializing Africa and creating opportunities for food and for business. The third priority, ladies and gentlemen, highlighted by Mr. Adesina, is to integrate Africa. Currently, it's more difficult to do business within Africa, with Africa, than doing business outside of Africa. Only 12% of trade in Africa is inter-African trade. And this compares very poorly with the more than 60% that you would find in the EU. It is hoped that the tripartite free trade area, which should hopefully be ratified by the end of this year, would add or push up this figure to about 30%. Still way below the 60% that we then see in the EU. The fourth priority is one that I already addressed on the side, namely that of industrializing Africa, developing its manufacturing sectors and industrializing its agricultural sectors. Africa is in dire need to diversify its economies away from oil and commodities. Up until now, they've been fortunate and they had high prices, and they sat back and they enjoyed the wealth coming from that. It is ironic that the company or the countries currently which have the highest growth, with the exception of the Ivory Coast, all of them are non-commodity exporters for obvious reasons. So the best time to diversify their economies away from Africa would have been 30, 40 years ago. Unfortunately, the next best time is today. We need to do something about it, but it does seem that the penny has dropped. The fifth priority, ladies and gentlemen, that the President of the African Development Bank has is that we need to improve the quality of life of the people of Africa, looking at high disposable income, looking at better housing, access to services, access to better education. It is hoped that Africa can become the factory of tomorrow. It is going to require better educated, better skilled, more competent people. So we look forward to developments in that field. Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is in all of these aspects that I've mentioned, all these priorities, Singapore and Southeast Asia can make a contribution in many, if not all, of these priorities. This by no means that we want to suggest that we need to provide aid. After all, doing good can be good business, with various business opportunities available for those interested in dealing with Africa and those willing to address the risks that confronts one in Africa. Risks that I might add frequently get overemphasized to the detriment of the opportunities that do exist. One specific point I would like to highlight very briefly before I hand over to our speakers, ladies and gentlemen, is that I recently read an article by Google addressing the scenario of Africans increasing their presence in the digital space. Currently, according to Google, only 29% of Africans are online. This is forecast to increase to about 50% by 2020. In itself, this offers various opportunities in a whole range of e-commerce fields. A further statistic that we need to bear in mind is that 60% of Africa's unemployed are between the age of 18 and 35. Developing digital entrepreneurship and creating new job opportunities for young people is therefore critical to Africa's transformative power. An overall challenge that I think that is crucial that we need to address at some time, and the challenge that I've set the panel and asked them to prepare for today, is what is the role of the SMEs and entrepreneurs in Africa? How do we get them the opportunity? When you look at large corporates, multinational enterprises, it's much easier for them. Kellogg, end of last year, purchased a 50% stake in Multipro, a subsidiary of Tolerant, for $450 million US. It's easy to go that route. When you're a family business, a small or a medium enterprise, an entrepreneur outside of Africa, how do you get involved? What opportunities are there for you? Ladies and gentlemen, it is my hope that you have a very informative session, that you find it very interesting, and that you have questions, those questions that you do have, that they do get answered. Once again, welcome, and I would like to acknowledge our High Commissioner from Rwanda, His Excellency Kavaruganda. Thank you, sir, for attending. Please enjoy the morning with us, and we look forward to some very interesting discussions. Thank you very much.